If you actually do acknowledge that you have an inner critic, then you have a lot of other things because it connects to so much other elements of the inner world. And that's terrifying for a lot of people.
None of them will even talk about what their inner critic says, let alone give themselves praise and validation when they actually acknowledge what that inner critic is saying and the impact it's having on them. This will have been a couple of weeks ago, I think, at this point, right? When
By
is
the
this
time this
episode coming
launches.
out?
Yeah.
Yeah, by the time this launches, this will have been a couple of weeks ago. You
Mhm.
and I did our July out of the mud.
Mhm.
And um the topic that we dove into was about our inner critic. And I made it a point in that event to really be vulnerable about the way that my inner critic works and just how bad my inner critic still is. And especially regarding my perfectionism and needing to look perfect all the time in the way that I judge and shame myself, particularly around my appearance. And it was fascinating because there was a few people in that event who were really vulnerable with us afterwards and said, you know, if I'm being honest, I didn't think that this was relevant to
Mhm.
me. And I didn't think this was going to pertain to me because I didn't think that I had an inner critic that was hurting me at all. And by the end, they were like, oh my God, I'm so glad I came to this because holy shit, this resonated more than I thought it was going to.
Mhm.
Why do you think people why do you think people struggle to acknowledge that they have an inner critic and that it has the amount of impact that it does? Because honestly, I think that was one of the biggest things that we learned from that out of the mud was that we all have it. It's all really severe in most of our lives. And none of us want to admit that we have it and that it's that severe in our lives. So from what you've seen, why is that?
I'm actually going to go with what I've heard, B. And this is what's fascinating because it's not just from this event that I'm going to share the sentiments of our community members, of clients, of people in the past, in particular, the words of the men that I've talked to and male clients
Mm,
that I've had around this. Because what I think is that a lot of women, and this is obviously more of a blanket statement, but B, I know that you and I have talked about this plenty of times and have gotten so much of like validation, I would say, from people
mm,
where more women than men, and I'll just say this, right? Going to genderify this, more women than men actually acknowledge and their inner critic, like acknowledge that she exists, acknowledges that they have one, and kind of don't really blink too much of an eye towards it if we were to
mm,
compare it towards the males. Men, on the other hand, acknowledging that they actually do have an inner critic, um, it seems to be, and these are the words from my male clients, it is exponentially harder to acknowledge that an inner critic exists and that they have one because it creates a slippery slide of vulnerability that the men that I've spoken to are terrified of and that they're ill practiced in. And that slippery slide of vulnerability, I think, echoes a statement of a bigger conversation around most people not genderifying this, of how if you actually do acknowledge that you have an inner critic, then you have a lot of other things because it connects to so much other elements of the inner world. And that's
mm.
terrifying for a lot of people because it's a slippery slope of vulnerability. It's like a slip and slide that you don't fully have control over. And it's terrifying for most people.
I love the out of the mud events, number one, because I'm starting to learn that I really am a teacher at heart. Like I love teaching these concepts and I love really diving into these. That's why I love doing the podcast so much.
Yeah. Mhm.
And the other reason that I love it so much is because I think it's one of the only places that the people in our community have to really see that there's other people going through what they're going through and
Mhm.
giving them the permission to say, like, "Oh, me too. Wait,
Mhm.
them? They're
Right.
going through this? Like, what? That makes no sense." The
Right.
reason I say this is because everyone in that group, it was really interesting how quick they all were to give me so much love and praise when I showed them my inner critic. And yet I know behind the scenes, none of them would ever do that for themselves. In
Right.
fact, I've talked to every one of them. A lot of them were my clients. None of
Mhm.
them will even talk about what their inner critic says,
Mhm.
let alone give themselves praise and validation when they actually acknowledge what that inner critic is saying and the impact it's having on them.
Yeah.
It's really hard seeing people really unnecessarily suffer with that inner critic because they can't acknowledge it. A
Mhm.
lot of women too, like, yes, it's more acceptable for women to talk about their inner critic, but only in very specific ways.
Right.
Like, it's not for other women to go around other women who they're, like, quote unquote in competition with and vulnerably express, like, "Hey, I'm really insecure." That would never happen. If you're safe with a friend, maybe, but as long as that friend isn't better than you, then yeah, I'll
Mm.
be vulnerable with you. But if you're insecure about your friend, you're not gonna go up to them and say, "Hey, I'm really vulnerable right now. You're intimidating me. You're way prettier than I am." Like,
Right.
that's never gonna happen.
Hello, my name is Bree. So I would say my experience at Evolve has been absolutely amazing. I have learned and grown and done so many things that I didn't imagine that I'd be doing just over a year ago. So I'm really happy to be a part of the team and I encourage anyone who has the opportunity to join. Um, yeah, so this is an experience that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. So it's definitely unique, and there's so many like minded people, whether it's on the team or in our community, that can be by your side and support you. So that is an awesome experience.
What just came up for me is like when you see this happen, it's like, oh, get like if you're taking a picture with one of your friends or a couple of your friends, it's like, oh, what side do you want? This is my best side, right? Like that's acknowledging an insecurity without actually speaking it directly in the face, right?
Why are you calling me out?
I'm not.
Okay, listen, I'm hanging up. I'm going home.
But truth be told, like, what is that for guys, right? And guys, truth be told, it's like, oh, can you come over here? It's like
Guys
I've
don't take
observed that
pictures
it's
together.
no, it's more so
Unless it's like
proximity
a
of like,
big bro picture and then it's like who puffs up the most.
well, what's fascinating, what I meant by that is like some of my male clients have expressed as like, can you come over here is more of like a proximity. You can join me in these activities, but you're not going to join me in these other ones because if you pull up your truck or if you pull up your um four-wheeler or if you pull up your I don't know, golf clubs that are fancier than mine, like it's like a whole, oh my god, I don't want to have to acknowledge my inner critic exists in that, right? My golf swing or whatever. It's fascinating because it shows up in all these ways to your point that isn't as direct, but it's so pervasively there. And what does that prevent? This is what I want to ask you. You and I both know this, but truth be told, what does that prevent people from actually having in their life? The benefits of acknowledging it. What does it prevent them from having?
Well, I mean, we said this in the event, it prevents joy. If your inner critic is running amok, if you're not actually able, willing, and ready to acknowledge it, and then ready, willing, able, and capable of working on it, how are you ever going to experience true joy in your life? You can't. Because
Mm,
instead of embracing the things that you cannot change and working on the things that you can, you're going to be stuck in this holding pattern. You're going to be stuck in this negative loop, this toxic cycle, and you can't actually experience joy as a
Can
result
I
of it.
can I
Like,
add on here? I literally want to put in a male client's words. It's called the doom loop. It literally feels like doom
Ooh,
again and again and again and again. It's pervasive doom loop. That's what it ends up becoming.
is that why people call it doom scrolling? Because 'Cause they're just, like, repeating the same thing over and over again?
I could imagine it's the same feeling. Like you're not breaking a habit. You're not breaking what you're doing, which is a behavior that's not serving you or constructing a better, brighter future that brings more joy to your plate.
I had multiple clients this week. I had never heard this. This is like I think I'm pretty hip, and then I hear what people say, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I don't like, what the hell is going on?"
I love
I
when
had
that happens.
I had multiple clients this week tell me about this theory called "do it for the plot," and I'm like, "What the hell does that mean?" And they said you're basically doing actions because, like, it's like you're like a character in a movie, and you're doing it for the plot to make something happen.
Mhm.
I challenged the shit out of both of them on that because I was like, "Miss Ma'am, you're doing it for the plot, but your inner critic is trying to narrate that
Mhm.
plot based on what you're insecure about and what your fears are. So,
Facts. The
are
drum and
you are
comes.
you doing it for the plot because this is actually gonna benefit you in some way, or are you basically repeating a maladaptive toxic cycle?" And they were all like, "You know what? Why are you such a therapist? Like, you really had to call me out." I'm like, "I mean, hi,
That's what I'm
hello,
in your
you
life
know
for.
me? That's literally what I'm here for." So, we're not
Mm.
doing it for the plot. We are doing it for the plot of maybe like a Rocky movie, right? Or like something inspirational where we're improving and growing, but not the same BS cycles that we're repeating over and over again, and the plot never changes. It's like every rom-com movie is the same ending. It's like, "No, let's change it up." And a part of that is acknowledging your inner critic and
Mhm.
being willing to face it. Like, look it in the mirror and face it. And yes, easier said than done. I understand that. I also have done this and continuously do this. So if I
Mhm.
can do it, literally anybody can. Um, I could go on and on about this. That do it for the plot thing pissed me off.
I can imagine. I have one thing to add to this episode to kind of wrap it up. So, like, I have a couple of people, relationship talks, coaching clients in mind. I have a couple of personal clients in mind. If they were to like listen to this episode and really like have some soul validation in this episode, I want to give it. So, why no one actually wants growth? Yes, it's because of the inner critic, but the deeper layer underneath that is the lack of belief that's in themselves to actually move the needle forward in the area of growth that's beneficial for them. A lot of people don't believe in themselves, and that is one of the findings that you and I have brought to the surface that I think has really validated a lot of our community members, where their ego might be telling them that they want growth, right? They want to evolve, they want to do all these things, right? They want to change their habits. But truth be told, they might not believe in themselves yet to where
Yeah.
they can do that. And why is that? It's because their inner critic is really talking those narratives, the do it for the plots, the whatever it needs to hear in order for them to prevent them from actually going outside that comfort zone. And they stay in that consistent loop, the doom loop, and before they know it, like, years have passed. And so, truth be told, it's not necessarily that people, whether it be your partner, your friend, your family, whatever, they don't actually want growth. Truth be told, it's the byproduct. The lack of growth is a byproduct of their inner critic and the low self-belief or low self-worth that they have, right? And have cultivated to date. So I actually think that this is a really exciting topic that I am very excited. Like I said, with one client, I'm curious to hear the impact on you, what this event
Yeah.
was. And it was fascinating because truth be told, I think it helps the validation of that you're going through something, that you're not going through it alone, is sometimes the first jolt of energy that we need to recognize, like, oh, if other people have done that, then I can too. Exactly to your statement. So in
Yeah.
closing, episode suggestions, and final takeaway, I think I'll just close on the episode suggestion.
Same.
226 effective tools for dealing with challenges. That's a great tactical episode. B.
307 Motivation Monday, the reason you're not changing. DM us. We can help you. I'm going to leave it at that. We've helped so many people. We've helped ourselves. We, you know, we show up every day to do this, and there's 100 ways you can get involved with Evolve. So if you're ready to stop being in the same cycles over and over again, please reach out to us and we will help you find the way that works best for you.
Mhm.
All right, everyone. We will see you next time. Bye.